So I am Ali Tehrani. I am an assistant professor at Johns Hopkins School of Medicine, Department of Neurology. And today I would like to talk to you about the smartphone application that we have developed for measurement of eye movements to diagnose the underlying cause of dizziness and imbalance. The name of our application is iPhone. So we have developed this smartphone application that is able to objectively measure eye movement. So it first figures out where the eye is, and then it traces, using these traces of eye movements, it figures out whether this particular pattern of eye movement is consistent with what we call nystagmus, which is indicative of a disease, or if there is a skew deviation, or if there's an abnormal head impulse test, which are all tests of eye movements that can tell us whether a patient is having a stroke or vestibular neuritis or BPPV, which is benign paroxysmal positional vertigo. So in a sense, using the eye movements, we're going to try to figure out where the underlying cause of dizziness is. And this application is going to help us do that. Normally, the physicians can do these maneuvers, try to look at the patient's eyes during these maneuvers, but sometimes these eye movements are very subtle. And this application uses objective measures to identify these special subtle eye movements. So that's where this application will shine. Right now, what happens is that when a patient with dizziness comes to the emergency room or their primary care physician, 30 to 50% of these patients receive a CT scan, which is not helpful. If a patient has a stroke, the CT scan is not going to show it. If the patient has crystals in the ears that cause dizziness, known as BPPV, again, radiation and CT scan is not the answer. Same with vestibular neuritis. It's not going to show up on the CT scan. These eye movements are not something new. We knew about these eye movements being able to recognize and accurately diagnose the underlying cause of dizziness for years now. But these eye movements are subtle, and not every ED physician or neurologist consultant is a neuro-ophthalmologist who is really ready to discern these subtle eye movements. So that's where this app can shine. This app will be great in the hands of a physician, an ED physician, a neurology consultant, or a primary care physician. And they can point the app to a patient's eyes and record and see, well, whether this patient has any abnormal eye movements that are indicative of stroke or any other disease such as vestibular neuritis or BPPV that is causing causing dizziness and imbalance. The biggest barrier for implementing the eye movement based approach for diagnosing the underlying cause of dizziness was the fact that these eye movements are very subtle, really hard to figure out and discern. And you need years of training and be a neuro-ophthalmologist or otoneurologist to be able to recognize them well. Some neurologists are great at it, some don't get as much training. Um, and that's the reality on the ground, that we cannot expect every physician to serve at the level of a neuro-ophthalmologist or a vestibular neurologist. So that's where this app comes to play. So the ED physicians may not have the time or the bandwidth or the training or they need to recognize the underlying cause. That's why we see such high misdiagnosis rate in patients with dizziness. There are many publications on this. And we are hoping that by breaking this barrier for using eye movements as a tool to diagnose the underlying cause of dizziness, by bringing this app to the physicians, we will break that barrier, and the physicians will be able to diagnose the underlying cause of dizziness better with better accuracy. At first, our team under with Dr. Newman Toker, for years we have tried multiple ways, to extra training for physicians in the ED, using video goggles that are slapped on the patient's face for recording eye movements, And but every time there have been some major barriers. So initially, the retention rate for the training was, we had some difficulties with that, or it's hard to we found out that training, while it's good, it has not solved the problem. The hints approach, the eye movement based approach for diagnosing the underlying cause of dizziness, has been established for more than 15 years. So the hints examination battery, eye movement battery, is a protocol where we look at various eye movements, including head impulse test, nystagmus, and skew deviation. And using that examination battery, we get to the underlying cause of dizziness, whether it's stroke or vestibular neuritis. Again, despite this being part of the training, despite hints protocol being part of the neurology and ED examination boards, we still see that the eye movements are not recorded thoroughly in the charts, and the diagnostic errors are very high in patients with dizziness and imbalance. The next step was, well, if it's really hard and subtle, these eye movements are really hard to diagnose and really subtle, can we measure these objectively? And we started using video goggles that are like swimming goggles and measure your eye movements. Again, the problem has been the availability. You don't have these fancy goggles in every ED, in every place. But guess what? Every person has a smartphone in their pocket, and that was what prompted us to take the next step, make it available via phone to every person. That was our thought process in breaking the barrier to using objective measurements for assessing eye movements and making it available everywhere. In a sense, democratizing access to care. Because then every person, everywhere, no matter the financial situation, will have access to this application. We are still developing the app, but so far what we have shown and published is that we have shown that the app is actually measuring what we think it's measuring, in a sense that it is measuring. We have published that it is measuring the eye movements and head movements accurately. We compared it with laser results and controlled research setting eye movement measurement, and it was doing what it was supposed to do. The next step that we did was that we induced nystagmus in patients and compared it with our FDA-approved video goggles that are on the patient's faces and are, in a sense, our surrogate gold standard. And the results were very much similar. So it was around 0.96% correlation between the results of the app versus the results of the video goggles for the measurement of nystagmus velocity. So when we said this is nystagmus, the answer was accurate, and the velocity that we measured was also accurate. We then used it in actual patients with dizziness. We took the next step. We took a step further as well. We put it in the hands of patients with ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease. You may remember this from the Ice Bucket Challenge, when patients, there was a lot of funding effort for raising awareness for ALS for patients that cannot move their arms and legs. And it's a very debilitating disease. And we were trying to find out if we can find out about if these patients can be recorded and whether we can record their eye movements well, so as a way to look at the progression of disease in these patients, because this has been something that hasn't been looked at very well. And we showed that these patients can record the eye movements by themselves or with help from their caregiver, without the help from a physician. And that was also an important thing to show that how usable this application is. And we have some preliminary results from patients with BPPV, benign positional paroxysmal vertigo, where so far we have shown specificity of almost 100%, sensitivity of 75%, in these patients, and a very high 92% positive predictive value, which are fancy ways of saying when it recognizes this in BPPV, it is accurate and it's not going to mistake stroke for it. So, so far, we are very happy with the results. Our next step is to request send applications for further funding, and then to pursue FDA application for FDA approval. And then later on, we should put it in the hands of our consultants, ED physicians, neurology consultants, primary care physicians. Even next step would be to put it in the hands of patients at home, so that we can diagnose dizziness early before something bad happens. So that would be our next step. All right, so our app right now is only available for research purposes, unfortunately not available for everybody to download and use. Um, and we are hoping that we will get the funding and the support that we need for further developing it. And hopefully you can keep up with the Vita news and they will keep you updated regarding further development.